Assalamu alaikum everyone. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'een. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta 'alayhim. Ghayril maghdubi 'alayhim waladdallin. Ameen. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli waj'al li waziran min ahli Haruna akhi ushdud bihi azri washridhu fi amri kay nusabbihaka kaseera wa nazkuraka kaseera innaka kunta bina basira wa sallallahu ala Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Welcome everyone. Inshallah, we will continue with the 17th word, reflecting on the verses in the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate. That which is on earth, we have made as a glittering show for the earth in order that we may test them as to which of them are best in conduct. Verily, what is on earth, we shall make but as dust and dry soil. What is the life of this world but play and amusement? So verses from the Quran, the last one being section 6, verse 32. What is the life of this world but play and amusement? And as we've been going through this particular section of the 17th word, we see how the author is presenting in his own understanding of commentary-wise of these words, the picture he's giving in terms of what our purpose of life here in this world is. Because this is not to understand that we're not going to be here in this world forever. It's not our permanent place, but through the experiences that we go through, by experiencing and learning about the qualities, basically whatever we go through, we are the experiences and what we make out of them, the conclusions we go and in terms of seeing how they're coming, in terms of basically educating my human side, my spirit, my soul. And of course, the author, we went over all this, how all different, why give life and wonderful, different, to show us all the different seasons, entertain us with different kinds of favors like food, air, atmosphere, friends, family, whatever we are enjoying. When one view is that everything is going to perish, whereas what the light of the Quran shows us that, through the light of belief, that things are, there for a purpose. They don't go into extinction or exit. The death is not like the end of execution or the end, but it's the door, an opening, which is a very different kind of view, like totally contradicting each other. Execution versus a door to light-filled worlds is a very sharp contrast. And of course, we went through what this world is: place of trade, temporary exhibition, a guest house, go to the person. The one thing that was interesting was, I think, basically learn the meaning and grasp it, but ignore its decorations. Then go. So use this world in terms of getting to know who the owner of this world is. Go get to the meaning, get to know his qualities, get to know, establish a connection, a relationship with this owner of this world. Basically makes, one should realize that love of the world and the attachment of it are quite meaningless. Very powerful phrase. Love for the world and attachment to it are quite meaningless. So through the world, love the owner of the world. It's like you get a delicious food and you say, hey, I love this food, but you ignore the one who actually prepared it for you, where the love has to really be directed to. So it sounds very funny, but that's how things are. The reality of this world. And our brother Ali wanted us to go over this, the second station of the 17th word, which kind of resembles poetry. But I think the author has meaningfully and very consciously phrased these particular points that he has mentioned in terms of what the education entails for us in this world. And I think he was, because he's, I think, traveling today, so that's why I need all of you to chime in and work together. So cry not out at misfortune. I think this was something that we can work on. Cry not out at misfortune, O wretch, come trust in God. For know that crying out compounds the misfortune and is a great error. So would anybody like to share what they understand from misfortune? Like first thoughts, and then we can work together, inshallah. No?
Initially, the idea of misfortune is seen in this, that some sort of uncomfort or despair or something that is not what is in agreement with your, let's say, human expectations. So some sort of contradiction that you are not able to resolve and answer, and it becomes a source of despair. So that's what I'm thinking to start with.
Yep, that's a good start. And Faria puts the comment, something undesirable is seen as misfortune, along the same lines as Farah shared. And yeah, so for example, our experiences, we journey through this world, like in the civilization, what is treated as misfortune is something doesn't go along with what the expectations of an individual are. And that's quite seen as something, yeah, this is, everybody goes through that. You don't get, one doesn't get everything that they desire in life. They're saying, hey, I want to go to this school, but then I was not able to go. I went to another school. I applied to a few jobs. I was preferring one, but then I go to another one. I want to live in a particular city, and then the job is in that particular city. So there are, at different stages of human beings, there are different things that one goes through, and based on the perception of the individual, it may seem, hey, I'm benefiting from this, or I'm not, I would have been better in this particular thoughts come to the human mind in their journey. Or God forbid, sickness happens, something is given, which are serious things, or maybe the house goes on fire, something gets flooded. So all different scenarios happen, which are treated as much serious scenarios, and they say, hey, or this is person so and so is misfortunate that he's going through this life experience. God forbid, all those negative kind of experiences that one may go through, that has a heavier impact and is seen as a much stronger misfortune. But as I'm sure you're understanding, you guys know this very well, as this author treats sicknesses, physical sicknesses also as, and everything is treated as an education, means of education. You fail, and then you see that as your learning. whatever you go through in life, whatever happens in life. So it's not really a misfortune at the end of the day. It's part of the education for the human being, for the spirit of the, although my body may be in pain, maybe suffering, going through difficulties, but my spirit has a different relationship, what it concludes, what it makes out of it.
Yeah, I think to add to that, it just from the sentence like cry not out and misfortune, it appears that the misfortune is not the issue, it's the reaction or the way that one looks at it. So the act or decision to cry out about it or complain about it, or I guess treat it as some sort of source, or treat the experience as an opportunity to complain, or whatever it is that your reaction, that is the the point that asks attention, but it's not the misfortune or whatever the experience in and of itself.
Yeah, good addition. So you use that misfortune as a stepping stone, jumping board to get to know, to go and to the trust in God. The trust in God is also like a jump being made, but to wonder about it, to see how's it happening, what is the purpose behind it, get to the meaningful aspect of that particular situation. And at this stage, I think, yeah, it makes sense that, hey, misfortune is not really the problem, but what you, as you said, what you make out of it, what the conclusion that you arrive at. And the conclusion has to go to what the light of belief brings man to, what the human being is seeking, really, what the spirit and the soul is searching for. Would you like to add anything? Yeah, you're unmuted, so I wonder if you want to speak, Farah.
Oh, sorry. I just kept it unmuted just so that I can, it's easier.
Yeah, go ahead if you want to talk.
No, it's just easier to share comments if I just keep it unmuted.
All right. So let's move on to the next phrase. For know that crying out compounds the misfortune. And I'm sure this is somehow is relating to the verses in the Quran, where the message I'm getting at least is, what a great error is. Don't be falling into error by losing yourselves in things that are not really worth paying attention to, giving your time to. Because your purpose here is really to work on your relationship with your Lord.
I'm thinking that when something, let's say, undesirable or misfortune happens to someone, and we or to us, and we find ourselves, let's say, complaining about it or lamenting about it, in that moment, who is really, who is it that we are directing our complaint to at that moment? So if we think that that misfortune, or if we regard that event or that experience as something that is just pain in and of itself, with no other purpose other than just to make someone feel hurt or sad or miserable, and there's no other purpose behind it, that means that our complaining about it is also equally directed at nothing but the fact that it's just a complaint in and of itself. Because at the end of the day, who is it that we are lamenting to? And so in that case, I'm understanding this idea that, crying out compounds the misfortune, that it builds up on that same error. One, obviously, like when we hear about this in our daily lives, that complaining doesn't solve anything. It's like a common way of understanding things. But in this case, it's true in the sense that our complaint isn't directed at anything that is actually the source of that experience. And so saying that, or continuing to direct our cries towards nothing, builds or multiplies, in this case, the error that was implicit from the beginning. So so the point, I think, for me is, if we think that if we take the misfortune to be a misfortune in and of itself, then our complaint or our understanding or expression of it will also mirror that assumption and will be of no use, but at the same time might even perpetuate the misery, because we're just sort of repeating ourselves with no purpose, no direction. It goes nowhere other than within in itself. So it compounds the misfortune.
Yeah, that makes sense. So for your comments, crying out and focusing on the misfortune without looking for its purpose leads to getting away from one's existential reality, which is the point of that undesirable event. So focusing on the misfortune without looking for its purpose leads to getting away from one's existential reality. So which is the point of that undesirable event. So the seemingly undesirable event is actually calling you to go and fulfill your purpose of existence, to go and establish that relationship with God. It's a good point. And for us said about the looking for solution, let's say, to the misfortune, if it stays there, there's no solution for that misfortune in this world. You keep looking and you may come across a solution, but there's no movement in terms of not going and fulfilling, using that particular event to go and fulfill the purpose of your existence, which is to trust in God. So, and the compounds part, is there anybody else who wants to explain why the crying out compounds the misfortune? Because crying out doesn't really take you anywhere, I would think, right? It just stays there. And the focus just keeps on, like something that is really meant to be used for something, an event or a misfortune. You're just wasting it by crying it out at it. So how does it compound further? Would anybody want to share their thoughts?
I'm thinking that it makes the compounding experience happens if you are just sort of stuck in the material causes. So you could you blame the event in, like, for example, you could think that it's just for the sake of pain, or you could think that someone else is responsible and you direct the blame. And it as long as you're just stuck or trapped in blaming or attaching causes to material or material or finite reasons, then in essence you are just going I guess deep. I don't know about deeper, but definitely getting buried in getting buried in like different causes and going nowhere. Um, like it's like a trap as long as you are associating a misfortune with a material cause.
Yeah, thank you. There are also some comments. So Faria says compounding is like an increase of no solution without any limit. So the no solution without any limit just goes on and on. Adam, would you like to speak, or would you want me to read?
Oh, I think if you read it's better. I'm sorry, I can't really talk here.
All right, no worries. So Adam says there also may be implication of negativity towards the giver. This causes more confusion and darkness in a person's life. Yeah, negativity towards the giver. So it starts with the negativity towards the event itself. And by not seeing that the event has been presented by a giver. So let's say sickness, for example, and just complaining about the sickness. So I can't do this, I can't walk, I can't run anymore. I'm stuck here in bed, suffering. The negativity of that sickness eventually is a negativity on the creation of that sickness, which is meant to, which points to its creator. So, yep, I think that's how I understand Adam. Implication of negativity towards the giver of that. A good point. Also, crying out continuously, I think, is a sign of hopelessness in one's feelings, because it feels that as if there is no hope anymore. That's why the misfortune is being lamented at. Yes, Sohail, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. I just add on to what Farah and Adam said. The no solution part is interesting. What Farah was saying, that when you're crying, nothing's being solved, and it's not to discount the fact that a human being wants to cry, but that should be a reason to find a solution. So crying, in and of itself should be a reason to find the solution, which is, as he says, "O wretch, come, trust in God." So to me, it's interesting in that he's saying that, that is really the solution. I mean, people may not want to hear that, but that also then speaks to what is sort of my state in terms of, or my contentment with the divine decree, what he wills things to be. And then my own state, he says, "Oh wretch," in that, like, when I'm crying out at misfortune, it's a question of, thinking about whether I, am I in a position to demand things or to expect things, or that I should be given something? And just crying out and not reflecting on those aspects of why I'm crying out or what is the reason, then sort of misses the point of anything that we experience. So, to what Farah was saying, it's the solution of reliance upon God, or, tawakkul ala Allah. So, if we can't find that solution in our experiences, then we've sort of missed the point. Because otherwise, what's the point of the divine decree? Then it just becomes an expectation that things should be as we want them to be, or as I want them to be. There's no God in that equation or picture. It's very horizontal. So it's how I expect my life to be or what I should be experiencing, and things don't match up with that, and then I'm upset about it. But nothing to do with what is my true position in this world and my true position before God, and who is God, and what's my relationship with him, and what is his decree. Like, those things are all missed in that equation.
Thank you for the comments. Yeah, Farha, go ahead.
I'm reflecting on Adam's comment, and I'm having a little bit difficulty in sort of just sort of agreeing with this part of that there's an implication of negativity towards the giver. If there is a negativity towards the giver, then I can see that maybe there's an intention in making it capitalized. Because if there is a sense of negativity towards the giver, then that means that in some way that negativity or that is justified or like could be attributed to the giver. So I'm in that moment, I'm trying to reflect on when one is expresses some sense of blame towards someone, in this case the giver, like, is there conception of the giver or the source even the same as the absolute source? I don't know if the question or thought is clear, but maybe if an example is like, I'll try, but if I'm using a hammer and it doesn't, it's not working, or the nail doesn't get into the wall or something, like if I can blame the hammer, but there's actually no logical basis for me to blame the hammer. And so in that case, like my negativity towards the hammer is just illogical. And so in this case, because it's not within the ability of that hammer to be responsible in that manner. And so in the case of someone being negatively assigning a reason or a cause to an absolute source, like in that case, are they even aware of what that source is in order for them to have negative feelings or implications to the giver?
Yeah, one example that's coming to me is like with like young people, teenagers, or when they go to like a restaurant, or maybe somebody cooks for them and they're not happy with the food. So oh, this food sucks, man. This is like, I didn't do this. It just expresses their dissatisfaction. It definitely portrays the negativity goes to the one who made that food. Or they'll say, hey, I'm not coming back to this place anymore. The food sucks. Through the food, sucking out the food, the restaurant now is labeled as something, horrible. That's how our lives here goes, right? With the way we live in this kind of a causal chain, we go through some experiences and then we blame it on that particular thing, but we never jump and see who the source of the event or the existence is. So in that sense, the negativity through the event goes and is directed to the creator of that event. Yeah, if you would like to share anything else, then we can move on to the next one. As Suhail was saying, definitely the crying out at the misfortune and then not really going and relying on your Lord, trusting in your Lord and seeing the event as coming from your Lord is very painful. It's hopeless. Sohail, go ahead.
Yeah, that's what I mean. To Farah's point, I agree in that. Even I may understand, like, just intellectually what divine decree, divine determining is, but am I really sort of content with it? Like, have I accepted it? There's a difference, yeah, and as they say, like knowing the path and walking the path. So, I mean, even if, let's say, even if somebody, I understand intellectually, that God must be absolute. Okay, like I'm certain about that. No one needs to convince me otherwise. But even then, does not necessarily mean that I'm not going to be unhappy. And it's really that state or spiritual state that, am I content with potentially what I know? I mean, the first step is knowing or understanding, as far as I was saying, but even then, I may not even be content even in that state, simply by knowing, but by, really sort of internalizing that perception of the world. So that it's multiple steps. One, coming to the realization, that not only must there be a creator, source, a sustainer, a God, but as far as I was saying, absolute, and then not just knowing what he must be absolute, but then realizing that absolute by definition then means absolute in every aspect of the world, so including my life. In other words, he has dominion and control over even my, what I think may be insignificant aspects of my life, and more than I can even imagine. And it's really coming to that realization, not just intellectually, but emotionally, that one can find a solution to this problem.
Yeah, good point, Sohail. So the internalizing part, about, if you can maybe emphasize a little more on that, how, because intellectually everybody understands that, they're going out of the misfortune, but the human feeling side, I mean, how would, like, let's say, an atheist feel about the misfortune maybe, and how does a believer see that, internalize, how does the process differ? Because everybody goes through events and they're like misfortunes, and intellectually we all try to rationalize things, quote unquote, not reason but rationalize them. And of course we can reason them through our feelings and see the reality in terms of how is this coming, like what is this telling me. So I think that, yeah, Sohail or Farah, go ahead.
So in reflecting on this idea that someone could logically or intellectually know of an existence of an absolute creator, and, like, in their words say that yes, everything that happens because of a reason and happens because of will decreed by this absolute source, I'm thinking that the difference between someone saying it or confirming it in sort of its statement can be different between someone actually internalizing it, based on whether or not that confirmation is something that was their own conclusion, as we often talk about the belief matters being something that you confirm within yourself based on your own presentation of your intellectual data, your emotional data, and that getting confirmed within your, what we call our spirit. So I'm thinking that as long as that confirmation process is not happening within oneself and it's not one's own conclusion that is reiterated through different experiences in life and is not an active process that is really taking place on the individual internal level, there will be a disconnect between someone claiming it intellectually and internalizing it. So I see this being the difference between the two. Because most of the community or people we know who believe in a God know that, you know, everything happens because of the will of a creator, but at the same time, people do struggle with making sense of why them, and no matter how religious or, you know, confirming they might be in terms of their belief, at least, you know, verbally, but they still can struggle with why things are happening the way that they are in their life.
Yeah, point on. I do struggle. So Suhail, go ahead.
Just to add on to that, like a personal example, like I deal with all the time. For example, you know, it's like it's established that like, oh, smoking is harmful to one's health, and somebody may know that, like, oh yeah, it's obvious, but yet, like, it doesn't mean like they're gonna do anything about it, you know, because it's at the level of just simply, you know, knowing. For example, like, you know, like the Quran says, "Ilm al-yaqeen, ayn al-yaqeen, haqq al-yaqeen," like you can know it and you can see it, like you can see the experience of others, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I still get it, but then it doesn't become like your truth. As far as I was saying, haqq al-yaqeen, it's like it has to be your truth. I can't just, like, when I know something, it's as if like I'm being taught, and then it's like I'm just imbibing, or I don't like the word indoctrinating here, but like I'm taking somebody's truth and saying, okay, yeah, that makes sense, but it's not really my truth. You know, it's like I haven't come to my own certainty, and I may see it also, and I'm like, okay, yeah, so somebody told it to me, and I see it out there, like, oh, somebody's smoking and they're, you know, have poor health. Okay, well, that could happen to me, maybe. All right, but then, like, I notice, you know, my own experience is that until people experience their own consequences of their health, do they then like quit smoking? Because then it becomes their own truth. You know, they come to the realization, oh, this is true. This is definitely true. It's not just true because I know it and then maybe somebody told it to me. It's not true necessarily because I just see it out there, but it's true because I experienced it. It's my own personal realization.
Yeah, thank you. So first-hand experience, Suhail, that teaches you a lot. Going through the experience personally, it makes you, yeah, go through experience. But even as a first-hand experience, I think human beings also can rationalize and say, oh, because of this, yeah, still stay there and that, and not really use it in terms of moving on. You know, I guess people can even condition themselves in living in the misfortune. And even, I mean, I think it's a trend right now where they accept it that, okay, yeah, I mean, they even announced it publicly in many, you know, they tell their sicknesses and their illnesses and their conditions of how they're feeling in terms of the things that I mean, nobody wants to hear that, but they proudly are exhibiting some of those things, and as if normalizing that particular misfortune and just be humble with me, you know. That's how. But yeah, that's what I was thinking in terms of what we need to watch out for. So internalizing in terms of, yeah, when you go through the experience, even from other secondary experiences, but if you pay really attention to them and say, hey, look, this is an example for me to take that, hey, I should not be smoking. The example Sohail gave that, or even though if I have read in the journals or whatever the media, I've or the doctors have told me, health professionals have told me that this is something that is harmful for you. You know, if you want to live a healthy life, don't do this. I can learn from there also, although I may not have experienced it. But then again, there is I think the free choice comes in where I have to, and the dedication and the real seriousness for my life, where like I have a purpose, and why am I given this feeling of being healthy? So I can, yeah. Farah, go ahead, and Sohail.
I was reminded of a discussion we had some time ago, maybe not too long, but it was basically around the topic that, logically you can conclude that there is one God, or that, he must be absolute, but it does not satisfy you, like similar to the example being given here. Because, I mean, we understand that there is no physical human experience of infinite or absolute, and so it just remains on an intellectual level. And it is not until it is confirmed within one's consciousness that it finds, I guess, a reason to believe in it. And so, yes, the idea of that this is coming from an absolute God can be a very ineffective one, or a very, it can be, I don't want to say meaningless, but very limited, until someone is not able to confirm it on the level of their conscious experience of something that that man or human beings have absolutely no experience or any way of confirming that something is absolute in that sense. So that discrepancy exists as long as it does not become part of one's ability to conclude within, or by their by their ability of their consciousness to conclude this. And others can sort of help elaborate if they think this might be relevant.
Yeah, thank you. Sohail, go ahead.
I guess this kind of relates to what Farah was saying, in that, for example, like going back to a smoking example, for example, like, somebody who doesn't smoke, like they don't, may they feel like they may know the consequences of smoking and they may see it, but, even then, sometimes when people are offered a cigarette, they may smoke. And yet some people who are offered a cigarette, they say, I don't want to smoke. I don't want to touch that. And, to Farah's point, like, let's say I've never smoked and I don't want to ever smoke because I see it. It's, in that sense, it's because, like, there's a certain amount of reflection in that human beings can ascertain, even though, like, I have never experienced the consequences of smoking, I can see it and then imagine it for myself. Like, I can perceive the consequences for myself. And it's not just something external to me, but it's internalized. And in some regards, like, while it's a loose sort of analogy, like, conceiving of absolutes impossible, or perceiving absolutes impossible, we can only confirm absolute. And the question of how does absolute dominion, like, manifest in my life, it requires serious reflection. Just like, I mean, much more than somebody saying, I'm not going to smoke, even though I've never smoked, because I can perceive the consequences that can happen in my life 5, 10, 20, 30 years down the road. So likewise, the human being, in order to perceive the like, I guess you want to say, consequences of absolute, or the sort of how does it, how the relevancy of absolute in my life, personal life, requires, like, time and from in time reflection, like some serious deep reflection, because no one, unlike, like smoking, no one can tell you what absolute is. there's no like sort of manifestation out there per se. Like you can't just show it to me. However, I can see, and what God does give people is every moment or every experience is a manifestation of his sort of dominion, his decree, his knowledge, his power, his will, whether in my own personal life or whether I see it on the outside world. And in every experience, it's a means for me to reflect and say, what is actually happening here? And if I sort of waste those opportunities, like if I just don't think about them and don't reflect, then it can never be something I'm comfortable with. So that when something does happen to me, or I am afflicted with something, if I haven't reflected, then like it was going to be even more intolerable than like using every moment, whether I like it or don't, and using it as a means to sort of, understand what his role in my life actually is. So, I think that's really the only way is some serious and really deep reflection. Otherwise, you can't it's not something you can just memorize or learn. This just doesn't happen that way, and it can't, because that's not the nature of belief. It's fundamentally personal.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I definitely feel things like something touches me or hurts me if I get sick. Yeah, my body's in pain, definitely. And I have to reflect on that, make sense of it. So engage my consciousness, my feelings, and reconcile them and reasoning and use that experience. So yeah, deep reflection is definitely necessary. I think there's a comment from Fariha, the experiences are personal for sure. And we learn from others' experiences. At the end of the day, I still need to confirm. That's interesting. I still need to confirm something. Need to confirm something for myself that I feel satisfied with based on these experiences. I think, yeah, that makes sense. So I need to confirm for myself because I'm looking for that satisfaction. So Hill, go ahead.
I just want to relate one of my favorite hadith about the Prophet. He said, I think like he had come across people, maybe in the masjid in Medina, where people were praying and people were sitting down discussing, like in a circle, physical circle, kind of like what we're having now, but physically. And I'm not exactly sure circumstances, but like essentially he said that 1 hour of like reflection or meditation or thoughtful reflection is better than I think a year of prayer. In other words, praying in some sense can be, I'm not saying praying in and of itself being consistent is easy, but in some sense, the motion in and of itself, like it's like, it becomes automatic then. It's kind of my experience is that praying just becomes a set of motions. But to actually like sit back and reflect of like what's actually happening, even in prayer, for example, what am I actually, why am I praying and for what reason and who am I praying to and why am I, and what does it even mean to pray? And just simply the act of sitting down and thinking or reflecting on one's own experience in life or what's happening in life. That's a difficult thing to do. And it requires some serious, intense sort of patience and training to do. And that's why it takes a lifetime. But I mean, it's really in that does one achieve sort of contentment with what his decree is. Otherwise, I think to Farah's earlier point about why people may not feel content is because I think religion, specifically, let's say Islam, the Quran, is taught from the perspective of knowledge. It's simply taught from the perspective of facts. Okay, they're because of how so true it is, like people will accept it because like it's it's so intuitively obvious that, people don't have to think about it too much necessarily and reflect on it. But because of that reason, also people then sort of take it for granted. Like they just take it at the level of knowledge that, oh, like Sunday school, like, oh, there's a God, and he must have complete dominion. So the Quran says, and it seems right. It makes sense. Like an alternative explanation really doesn't make any sense. And he has a decree over all things. His power and will are all encompassing. What does that actually mean? Nobody actually talks about that. Like no one really ever talks about what that actually means. They just say this is established fact. This is just in some way God-given fact. But what does it actually imply, or what is the underlying reason for it, and how do I know that, and how am I certain of that? That's another question altogether that's never really answered.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that hadith about reflection. Like it reminded me of how in this month of fasting, Ramadan, how, all the rituals that we are going through, they kind of become very physical and intellectual, and, waking for suhoor and then praying and even engaging with the Quran, as I see, and then, your night prayers, and it kind of becomes like a schedule, and doing it every day, I feel like the real meaning sometimes is lost, and like how, that relationship and connection and trusting in God, living that message with each and every event. There might be situations going on in one's life also that may be seen as a misfortune, or somebody may be going through some health issues, or somebody may be going through some other challenges in life, maybe job changes, maybe relationships that are going. And then of course, as the beautiful hadith also reminds us on, every time all these events are basically meant for us to get back in track and fulfilling our true purpose. So reflection definitely comes in play in terms of, hey, don't just lose yourself in that particular event. Don't lose in the ritualistic events themselves as well. There are meaningful things that you have to engage your whole being, your feelings, your senses, your consciousness, your reasoning, and seeing that you are a being that is entrusted by God, and they're a source of recourse, that whoever you can have hope in is the one who is your Lord. So trust in that particular source. Otherwise, the crying out at misfortune, just compounds this. Within the universe, there is no hope. You cannot find any hope from the scientists, the philosophers, the doctors, or whatever you may think has, there is hope in there, but true hope is only from your source of existence. All right, so I think, this was a good discussion, I would say. I benefited a lot. If you have any final comments before we wrap up the session for today, inshallah. So cry not out at misfortune or wretch. Yeah, human being, if he cries, he is definitely a weak, wretched being. Come trust in God. For know that crying out compounds the misfortune, and you lose out. It's a great error. Why? It's a great error. It's not like a minor error, it's a great error. Because we lose out on that opportunity to establish our connection with God. Seeing that misfortunes, so-called misfortune, actually it's a good thing, that misfortune, because its purpose is to get one closer to your Lord? I mean, I know it sounds very intellectual, but I guess what Suhail had shared, inshallah, we can all reflect on that with our feelings, our emotions, our senses, that, think about it. What am I doing in this today, in this, what does fasting actually means for me? How is my relationship with myself, starting from myself and going to who gives me existence or is treating me in a particular way. All right, inshallah. All right, so I'll conclude here. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim. Wa akhiru da'wahum alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Bi hurmati suratul Fatiha.